Hello everybody, thank you very much for coming along today to this panel entitled Is the Coloured Gemstone Industry Meeting Its Market Potential? We have a very distinguished group of panellists. First off, let's have them introduce themselves, starting with Melissa down the line. Just tell us a little bit about your involvement with the coloured gemstone industry.
Thank you, David. My name is Melissa Wolfgang. I'm a gemstone and diamond dealer. I also deal in vintage jewelry, and I manufacture jewelry, but I would say that my heart lies in the trading of colored gemstones.
Good afternoon. I'm Alessia Crivelli. I'm the manager director of Crivelli SRL. It's my family business, so me and founded by my father 50 years ago. And we have a brand, so we are a B2B, and we have a lot of retail all over the world, and we have fine jewelry, high jewelry. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Gianluca Maina. I am the head of marketing and communications at Fura Gems, one of the large-scale mining company for colored gemstones.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Edward Johnson. I'm a corporate responsibility director for the Gemfields group. Gemfields is a miner and marketer of color stones from Africa, specifically rubies from Mozambique and also emeralds from Zambia. Nice to be here with you today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Damien Cody. I am president of the International Coloured Gemstone Association, and in my spare time I also have an opal business.
So thank you very much, panelists, a very distinguished group of panelists. There are a lot of challenges facing the coloured gemstone industry right now. We're going to look at these various challenges in turn and look at ways to address them. But one of the key challenges facing the offer of gem-set jewellery right now is the issue of soaring and volatile precious metals prices. In 2025, gold was up 64.4%, silver was up 147%, and platinum was up 125%, due to a range of reasons, but including tight supply in some of those metals, but also investor buying, particularly of gold and silver. So first question to anybody on the panel, what is the impact of this soaring material cost on the offer, the provision of gem-set jewellery? How do you deal with it? And are you looking for, say, alternative offers of gemstones that are perhaps more accessible in price to compensate for the much more expensive precious metals? Anyone on the panel?
Well, there's no doubt that the price of gold's having an enormous impact. We've just seen gold jewellery sales reduced by 18% in 2025. The other big impact is that a big chunk of whatever sales are being done now is going towards the cost of gold. So it's not going into, profit for a retailer or a manufacturer. It's basically, being offset. So an enormous impact, and this may have been a time for enormous growth for coloured gemstone, and it probably would have been in normal circumstances, but the impact of the gold price is certainly there.
Well, we're a miner, and so we mine whatever is prevalent in our mines, which is ruby in Mozambique and emerald in Zambia. So we can't switch to other materials. So obviously I'll defer to others who are involved further downstream from us. But obviously for us, we have a full run of mine from the lowest value product to the highest, which we would call our premium ruby or premium emerald. And what we see from the market is the higher value feeding into the luxury is the area that is consistently in demand. And supply is not keeping up with demand, all right? So our premium rubies and our premium emeralds, and I feel it'll be the same for my colleague Fura, are forever in demand. That's because of rarity. So despite fluctuations in people's financial ability, fine, rare, colored gemstones are always and continually in demand, and prices are rising, reflecting that.
Gianluca, would you agree with that? Is it the same message for you at Fura?
Yeah, I think we're totally aligned. We do as well mine rubies in Mozambique, sapphires in Australia and Mozambique, and emeralds in Colombia. And what we see is that fine quality, the prime quality, is really increasing their prices constantly. We also see opportunities for some of the lower quality goods that probably would go to a different kind of jewelry that is facing this problem of rising gold prices and that are looking for alternative gemstones. So, yeah, as a mining company, we cannot really determine what we're going to mine, and we need to find a way to the market for the products that we extract. So we are aware, and I would say that we are very much in a long-term business because we own licenses for 30 years. The investments we do are really set in the long term, and these fluctuations, we need to face them, but overall what we notice is that price increase.
I was just speaking just a few minutes before coming onto this panel with the owner of Schreiner, one of the lead exhibitors here, who essentially had the same message at the really top end of the market. The soaring gold price is having zero impact on the provision of very high jewellery set with natural fancy colour diamonds. Even though gold has gone up so much, the market is very resilient. Alessia, in this context, it's still an issue though, isn't it, the soaring precious metals prices? I mean, given that ruby prices, for example, are very well supported due to firm demand and tight supply, natural ruby prices, you, as providing fine jewellery, are you looking for alternative coloured gemstones in your offer to compensate somewhat for the high precious metals prices?
No, really, actually, no, because my customer asks us, obviously, why the prices are increasing in that way. So mine is a family business, so I create with my retail and my final customer. They trust me and I trust them. So we explain that the situation, and they know, obviously, the situation in this moment, the geopolitical situation is complicated. And they know that the gold and precious material are the first thing that can change the price during this situation. So when we explain them that the situation is not our choice to increase the price, they are able to understand, and they are able to understand the value of a creation. And I think also that they ask higher quality because they understand the value, and they understand that in this moment could be also, I told you before, the scarcity. Luxury is also scarcity, and they think that the high product could be better than a lower in this moment. About a lower creation, I use always good stones. So, in my opinion, for this moment, no.
Melissa, any point of view from you on the impact of soaring precious metals prices on the provision of gem set jewellery?
I agree with what Alessia said, although I don't manufacture in a mass production or in a collection. I do a lot of bespoke and one-offs, so I definitely am feeling the impact. What's difficult also, especially in my arena, is when you, to your point, when you're talking about replacing stones and lesser expensive stones, etc., it's a bit of a vicious circle, because when you buy, if you want to replace, say, a ruby with rubellite, it's very hard to justify the price of your finished piece when instead of a very expensive stone, people are not stupid. They understand. So I think sometimes it's almost counterproductive in terms of consumer confidence to do that.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to another challenge in facing the colored gemstone market right now, which is the challenge of US tariffs, which can be very significant for certain supplying countries, such as India and Thailand. And we had the latest news from President Trump applying a 25% tariff to those countries that trade with Iran. So in the case of India, for example, which has Jaipur as a supplying center for polished colored gemstones, they would now be looking at a 75% tariff into the United States. Thailand also trades with Iran, and it will be facing a high tariff, presumably going forward, in terms of the supply of its polished gemstones to the US market. So again, question to anybody on the panel, how are US tariffs complicating trade of colored gemstones? You can relate to your personal experience or just your point of view about the market impact.
Why don't I start? Because the supply chain starts with us as a miner. And so obviously just to understand the perspective of a miner is we mine the material and put it into the supply chain through an auction system, and then our customers typically for our emeralds are not exclusively, but typically from Jaipur in India, and our customers for our rubies typically, not exclusively, are from Bangkok in Thailand. Then obviously they have customers of tier 2 suppliers all the way around the world to different gemstone dealers. So I think essentially when we speak to our clients, which is about 30 or 40 cutting companies predominantly in those 2 markets, they're still unsure as to what the effect of the current situation with tariffs is. Many companies, because don't forget, he made many threats before he imposed the tariffs, and they were able to move goods into the US market before they were actually imposed. So for this Christmas, our information is that the amount of goods that were already in the market before the tariffs satisfied demand. All right? Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball as to know what President Trump will do with tariffs in the future. But so far, they haven't had an effect for us on our customers exporting from Jaipur and Bangkok to America. And don't forget, America is just one market. All right? There are many other markets for colored stones. So obviously, if you're facing resistance from one market, you're able to shift your focus to sales in other markets where there's considerable demand, again, for fine, rare gemstones.
I just came from the IIJS Bharat signature show in Mumbai, where the state-backed Gem and Jewellery Export Promotion Council of India are clear. Their policy clearly now is to seek, as much as possible, alternative markets to the United States to reduce reliance upon the United States, which is the #1 export market for Indian gems and jewellery. Damien, do you have how are you seeing the challenge of US tariffs?
Well, it'd be nice to sit here with rose-coloured glasses and say everything's fine. Clearly, it's not. We've just not taken out, but we've just slowed down the biggest consumer market in the world, and the biggest market for our product, coloured gemstones. And it's having enormous impacts. I mean, I spoke to somebody today who was in the process of setting up cutting shops in Europe because the European goods going into America were tariff-free. And that came about only a month ago. So they were setting up factory. And of course, overnight, that's changed again. So it's very hard. You know, I'm being asked all the time, what should we do? My members are saying, what should we do? And, you know, we need to pivot, we need to take stock, we need to look at things, but the biggest problem we have is this constant change and uncertainty. That's the biggest. I mean,
we've had layers of tariffs on India, haven't we? It started at 25%, then the issue of Russian oil came up, it went up to 50%, and now it's gone up to 75%.
Yeah, it's a moving playing field, and it's awfully difficult for our members, or for our industry, to plan around that.
So in terms of reaching its market potential, the industry, the colored gem industry, faced with the challenge of tariffs, is essentially the way forward, the solution, to seek as much as possible alternative markets to the United States?
I think there's also the lobbying process. AGTA, the American Gem Trade Association, along with other bodies, has been particularly effective in encouraging the American government to list a number of different materials. It's called Annex 3, and it's a list of materials where if the country has a trade deal with the US, those products are tax-free or tariff-free. And many of those are mined materials that are not found in the United States. So obviously diamonds, both rough and polished, and colored stones, rough and polished and preformed, are on that Annex 3 list. So that is an alternative as well, is lobbying of the government to understand the damage that it can do to the American industry if there is no free flow of goods for Damien's members of ICA, for example. So that is an alternative process.
So let's move on to the issue of the offer of synthetic colored gemstones, perhaps to some degree in the context of confusion in jewelry markets over diamonds right now, this confusion over natural and synthetic diamonds that seems to prevail among the jewelry buying public. This can potentially increase the visibility of synthetic colored gemstones. So I'd be interested in your views on what kind of challenge, if you like, to the provision of natural gemset jewelry is presented by the offer of synthetic colored gemstones. Alessia, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my position as a producer, we use just natural stones. By the way, it's a choice because we love stones. My father founded the company and he is the buyer. So he is the buyer by himself, is going to take the stones, and he loves natural stones. We have nothing against synthetic gems, obviously. But I think that you say something very interesting. The communication, the confusion around the communication is a choice. So my retailers, my customer know that we use just natural diamond. They trust me. So it's a value because we have a history, a family legacy. And in the stone, we see a legacy in the natural stone. So in this moment, something is changing, and a lot of customers ask to explain the difference between the synthetic and they ask also if just the synthetic are the ethical one. So this is very important because it is an incorrect situation. So CIBJO is working on this to create a good communication.
I mean, clearly, in recent years, we've seen a huge increase in the offer of laboratory-grown diamonds, say, for example, in engagement ring jewelry in the United States. Laboratory-grown diamond engagement rings account for roughly 40% of the market now. Several years ago, it was nowhere near that figure. Are the panelists concerned about the possibility that the provision of synthetic colored gemstones could surge in a similar way as seen in the diamond industry, or not?
There's been synthetic colored gemstones around for a long time, and they haven't really troubled the market too much. I think probably the reason for that is the fact that there are so many varieties of coloured gemstones that, you know, trying to build a market with synthetic coloured gemstones is quite difficult. And what we have to do as an industry is to build the romance and the allure around that beautiful natural product and where it comes from and how it came to market.
Ed?
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree completely from our point of view that today we see more on the opportunity side of creating the appropriate narrative to support natural gemstones and natural colored gemstones. And we haven't seen that huge of an impact of synthetics, absolutely.
If I may, I would like to add also 2 points. Nobody has managed, because as was said, synthetic gemstones have existed for over 100 years. Nobody has managed to produce a synthetic gemstone that looked as good, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that, as similar to a natural stone, because I don't want to say that lab-grown diamonds look good, but they do look similar or the same to, it's very discernible to the naked eye when you see a synthetic gemstone. That's number one. And secondly, there is no storytelling around anything that is man-made in the luxury industry. You can't tell a story about heritage, legacy, sentimentality. You don't create connection with something that's made in a factory. The whole beauty of jewelry is that there's a story behind it. As someone said this morning on another panel, billions of years growing in the ground. There's only one of that specific thing, even though we all know in all honesty that these rooms are full of gemstones, so they're not all rare, but there's no story around that. There's no beauty around something that just grew in a machine, in my opinion.
Ed.
Obviously, we get asked this question a lot at Gemfields. We're a listed business, so we have analysts asking us essentially exactly the same question. Are you concerned about synthetic colored gemstones impacting your business as a mining business for natural, obviously, natural color stones? Our response is always the same. We've seen this movie before, all right? And as has been pointed out by both Melissa and Damien, you know, synthetic ruby was first manufactured in the 1880s. If you go back and read your history books, the 1920s and the London and Paris ruby market, there was the same customer and trade concern about synthetic coming into the market, all right? 1920s. It is now clearly separated out, all right? So historically, and let's not forget history is an indicator of the future, all right? The price of natural ruby compared to synthetic, there is no comparison. All right. It took a lot longer because of the chemical challenges in synthesizing diamond to bring them to market in the quantities that they could bring. And, you know, that sort of started for me around 2015, 2018, when synthetic diamonds really started to come into the market. And there's been confusion since then. One of the things has been marketing that has been questionable about the supposed benefits of synthetics. The other has been the marketing that they're indistinguishable from the natural, which is not accurate. But that led to confusion with the consumers, and so that's why there's been the turbulence. It was exactly the same thing in the 1920s without the environmentally responsible angle, because unfortunately that wasn't as important to the consumer back in the 1920s. So we've seen the movie before. We're not complacent. We're obviously watching it, and we see some people trying to put the ethical or responsible angle because apparently mining is bad and we must stop it. Obviously, from our perspective as a miner, we think that mining is incredibly important for the producing countries and must be supported to be continued. And the consumer still wants that, is our experience.
Okay.
And furthermore, I'm sorry, David, and furthermore, producing synthetic stones is also bad because it's not, what's unethical about synthetic stones is the message that is being given and the story that is being told around them. I am not in any way denigrating or saying that synthetics are not okay. They're perfectly fine. Everything has a place. However, the truth must be told around the product. The product is not ethical. It requires multiple elements that are mined to produce them, thousands of hours of energy. There's nothing sustainable about any synthetics. And I think that message needs to be told.
Okay, let's move on to the supply chain and traceability, which is another potential hurdle for the colored gemstone industry to reach its potential. The diamond industry in recent years has made great strides towards knowing the origin of the stones, knowing where they came from. And part of the reason for that is that the diamond industry is controlled mainly by a few large industrial-sized groups, such as De Beers. Damien, presumably for colored gems, it's a completely different picture, isn't it? Because much of the production globally is artisanal, small scale. A lot of colored gems are mined, you know, in remote places. What is, in your view, the outlook for improving, if you like, traceability of colored gemstones in the supply chain, knowing where they came from?
Well, obviously it's far more difficult to have complete transparency in the coloured gemstone supply chain. That doesn't mean that we don't try and improve things. We simply must. Where we've got a new bunch of consumers wanting more from their gemstone than just the pretty blue or the pretty red. They want the story. And the stories that we can tell, most of them are beautiful stories. They honestly are. But we need to tell a little bit more about how they've come from mine to market. And I'm not going to say it's impossible because you told me not to use that word. But it is very difficult. But look, let's do what we can do.
Could you explain more, Damien, why it's difficult? Why is it difficult to trace these?
Well, I think I might have told you this story, and I've told it to a couple of people. This is factual about how coloured gemstones become part of a beautiful piece of jewellery. Mandarin garnet is mined in 10 different locations around the planet, mostly in very remote third world countries, remote areas. And if you can picture a mother of a family in a riverbed sifting gravels and finding a very small piece of gravel that is orange in colour, and she has the feeling that it's a Mandarin garnet. This little piece of gravel can feed her family for a month. That piece of gravel is eventually sold to a person who comes through their tiny little village on a motorbike and buys it from them, and then it goes through a whole series of steps, generally to the nearest market where gemstones are traded. And then from there it takes a very convoluted bunch of steps to eventually it ending up in a bag of 1,000 Mandarin garnets, all cut exactly the same size, all exactly the same colour, and for an order for a big fashion house. Now, the reality is that having complete transparency on that bag of 1,000 Mandarin garnets is nigh on impossible, because firstly, they've probably been aggregated from 10 different locations around the world, bought in or found in very remote places, and they've ended up in a bag together because they were the same product, the same size, the same quality, have been cut and they match. And so that's how something ends up with a famous fashion house doing something with Mandarin garnets. But to have a complete transparency on those 1,000 stones is nigh on impossible. But let's tell the stories that we can tell. Where are those locations where these 1,000 stones have come from? What is happening in those locations? What is the industry doing to support those people in those locations who are producing these goods? And as David said before, 80% of coloured gemstones are produced by artisanal miners. So we can't forget these people.
So Ed, you're within the 20% at Gemfields. Tell us a little bit about the Gemfields experience in terms of how you can deliver greater traceability.
Well, yeah, okay, we're a large-scale miner of ruby and a large-scale miner of emerald, and 100% of our product is fully traceable and has been since 2017. So when I hear the comment, and we talk about this often, and we're friends, when I hear the comment, it's impossible to trace coloured stones, obviously that's refuted by our experience over the past 20 years and the experience of Fura, Cruzeiro mine in Brazil, Belmont mine in Brazil, and all of those that are making sure that they're bringing fully traceable gemstones into a transparent supply chain, all right? Is it all coloured gemstones? No. So there is still that statistic that 80% of the world's coloured stones come from artisanal and small-scale mining, and it's much more difficult to trace them than it is from large-scale mines. However, our mine in Mozambique produces 50 to 70% of the world's ruby. It's the world's largest ruby mine. Now, obviously, I'm not on this panel to specifically say everybody should just go and buy ruby. It would be preferable if you did, though. It would be very helpful for us. But, you know, the point is, if you can buy colored gemstones that have full traceability and transparency, that's where, in my opinion, Gemfields has moved the market. And we're so grateful that others have seen the value in that, in bringing responsible, traceable gemstones to market. We wish more people would do that, all right?
Would you say then that there is a premium of industrially mined colored gemstones over artisanally mined colored gemstones because you are traceable and they are not?
So that's a really interesting question, that the premium for a responsibly mined product. I'd love your opinion on this. We're not finding that there is a premium to be paid for a responsibly mined product. We're trying consistently to be able to demonstrate responsible mining through alignment with international standards. And it's challenging and it's costly, okay? But what we find is our customers, all right, don't pay more for our product. They prefer to buy from us because it's easier to tell the story down through the supply chain.
So
but if there's
premium.
a similar quality product for a lower price from another provider, they will equally buy that because they make more profit from selling that, because they can buy it cheaper, thus and sell it at the same price. So obviously we don't align with that view. We like full traceability and really telling an honest, authentic story about the traceability of the product. But I think the challenge obviously is not in large-scale mining, or it's in the small-scale mining, all right, where it's extremely difficult to align small communities. Perhaps the woman that you talked about mining the Mandarin garnet, to ask her to align against a series of international standards for responsible production of her materials. That is a challenge, but it's not, if I can finish, impossible. It's possible if people say, this is what the consumer wants, so this is what I'm going to try to improve to provide.
But implementing, for example, a blockchain solution to fully trace the journey of a gem from an extremely remote artisanal location where there may be no electricity, where the miners may be illiterate, presumably would be almost impossible. Damien, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, David, it's very difficult. And I think the other thing, the reality is there's room for everybody. That's what I'd like to think. We value the work that Gemfields and Fura, Crivelli, Belmont, these big industrial miners, if you like, what they bring to our industry. They're very important players, and they do a great job of it. So we applaud them for that. But I think we have a social responsibility to ensure that we don't push little people out. What is the ethics in saying you must buy this ruby that has a complete 100% traceability? That's not terribly ethical. And I don't think these guys are saying that. What they've got is a tremendous product and a tremendous story, and it's traceable, and they should be applauded for that. So we applaud you for that. But let's not do it at the expense of the hundreds of millions of people and communities producing gemstones that may find it very difficult to follow that track.
I would like to add also that working in vintage jewelry, and a lot of the pieces that I buy have large center stones, so you could categorize me as someone who's in the circular economy. I have a lot of traceability problems because I buy vintage from private clients, grandmothers, auctions, all types of people. And I think it's important to add, to further Damien's point, that just because it's not traceable doesn't mean it's not responsible. And just because it's traceable and you can prove that it's ethical, that's wonderful. But the two are not mutually exclusive. And just because I don't know where it came from doesn't mean it came from somewhere bad.
So I'm going to try not to repeat what Ed said with an Italian accent, because that would be my way of doing. But no, I think that as Fura Gems, again, one of the large-scale mining companies, we do things the way we do because we have also a responsibility towards our employees, the local communities that work with us and that are impacted by by what we do. So for us, the choice of increased traceability through blockchain, for instance, was, I would say, an easy decision because we believe that given the role that we have in the industry, we had to step up and adopt that. And probably we can serve also as case study and work with the ICA and work with organizations to try and understand how can we use our experience in finding new solutions to increase traceability. And then there's a common word that we keep hearing since yesterday, all the panels, and it's trust. And I think that, you know, trust is the base of everything. You built your company, your father, on trusted relationship with suppliers. And so trust is underlying everything we do. And so we're going to speak about that. But I believe that really trust is what is basically helping us achieving that potential that we all want to achieve.
All right. So we've looked at various challenges affecting the outlook for the colored gemstone industry that may be stymieing to some degree its potential. Let's now look at the solutions, how to create demand for gem-set jewellery, particularly with regard to marketing. So first I'd like to ask anybody on the panel what you feel the marketing solutions to boost demand and sales for colored gemstone set jewellery should be. How can it be done?
Okay, so
And tell us about the Fura experience.
Yeah, we believe strongly that the colored gemstone industry or that the sector of jewelry lacks a lot of education about colored gemstones. And we feel that that's the most important marketing tool that we need to bring to the table to enable consumers to buy with confidence, to navigate through the huge offering of colored gemstones, to understand whether they're getting ripped off or they're buying a good stone at the good price. And if you do a very simple test and go to a jewelry shop and ask for colored gemstones, you will see that sales people normally have more problems talking to you about colored gemstones than they do with diamonds. And so we have that opportunity now that the diamond industry is facing some confusion to eliminate the confusion that is present in our sector for colored gemstones. And I really believe that education is one of the most important vehicles. And we can work across the supply chain to basically ensure that we all contribute to, at the end of the game, educate the salespeople and the consumer.
Right. So could you, Gianluca, elaborate a little bit more about that with regard to Fura's experience? Are you looking to boost your marketing drive in terms of dealing with retailers? And could you just give us a few examples as to how you would do that?
Yeah, concretely, it's very simple at the end of the day, but it's really through increased collaborations across the supply with manufacturers, with retailers, with brands, trying to transparently communicate about all the journey that the gemstone does from the mine to their bench, the workshop, and finally to the final product. And basically, as the beginning of the journey, we have a great responsibility to give them the right tools to basically understand very easily and very clearly what the journey of the gemstone is, and what the processes of extractions are, what the challenges are. So again, education also relies on, yes, trust and transparency, and storytelling needs to be factual as well and needs to be based on true facts.
Yeah. Ed, can you tell us a little bit about the outlook for Gemfields marketing? I remember a few years ago being on an aeroplane and seeing Gemfields advertising on an aeroplane, consumer-facing advertising. I mean, what is your focus on marketing? How are you doing it? I know you have relationships with designers, for example, who use gemstones sourced from Gemfields. Tell us a little bit about the marketing that you're using.
Yeah, thank you, David. I mean, I introduced myself as Gemfields as a miner. and a marketer of colored gemstones from Africa. So I think that's important, the clarity on those words. So we mine, and then I guess if anybody in the color stone market, Gemfields has pioneered the marketing of the product category of what we mine, which is rubies from Mozambique and Zambian emeralds. Obviously, our financial ability to direct to marketing goes up and down with our revenue streams from mining, and we've had a particularly challenging 12 months, and so our marketing capabilities of the product, almost on behalf of our customers who cut and polish and then sell in the sort of the old traditional De Beers model, that's been a challenge for us through 2025. However, from 23 through 24, we were doing considerable marketing or consumer research in China, all right? Because we obviously, like everybody else, see the growth of China, the growth of the Chinese consumer market and demand for jewelry. And if you think of China and you think of any one color that the Chinese associate with, it's red. So we feel that there's an opportunity there, and I'm old enough to remember when De Beers first started their marketing in China in the early 90s. I remember going there, and that ability or that attempt to persuade the Chinese consumer to buy a diamond for engagement ring, I think, has not been as successful as De Beers had hoped for, all right? So diamonds are not a go-to engagement ring in China. But what we found from our consumer research, and when obviously our revenues are able to return to how they were before, we can do more marketing of this, is that the Chinese consumer is looking for red in their jewelry, and ruby is obviously an example of that. So they want rubies, but they don't want an engagement ring. They want small, affordable, everyday jewelry. And affordable is a different line for different people. For some people, 1,000 is affordable. Some people, 10,000 is affordable. So what we do see is there is an opportunity there. So are we reaching our potential? We can see where there's a potential for increased sale of rubies. China, because of the cultural assimilation with the color red.
Very quickly on the question of China, and excuse me if this question sounds naive, journalists are always entitled to ask dumb questions. It's one of the few privileges we have. But do any of you on the panel foresee the opportunity to market more proactively emeralds as a substitute for jade in China?
Well, I think we're ignoring the elephant in the room if we're talking about China and coloured gemstones. The reality is that there's 43% duties and taxes on coloured gemstones going in there. So there's really, coloured gemstones only represent about 5% of all gemstones sold in China. There's no reason why that shouldn't increase. I mean, but there's a barrier that we have to overcome. So, from an ICA perspective, we are wanting to start engaging with Chinese officials and talking to them about the benefits of lowering those barriers. The obvious one is that there will be duties, at the moment diamonds have just increased, Julius told me, to 13%, just as of a month or so ago, from 7%. But still at 13%, coloured gemstones could have a serious market there. So if we can get coloured gemstones somewhere near diamonds, we would produce enormous revenue for China. Now, is that part of, Chinese thinking to have a luxury item coming into their country? Well, maybe not, but it's a store of wealth. And these days, currencies, what's the value of RMB? Well, it's basically artificially pegged to the US dollar. What's happening with the US dollar? Well, it's probably going down. So, and the price of gold is going up. How much gold is in there in China? I'm not sure. Does anybody know? But the reality is that by investing, for Chinese people to invest in diamonds or to invest in coloured gemstones, it certainly is a store of wealth for that nation. And they can't produce coloured gemstones, so why not allow it to happen? Why not open the doors, create a steady stream of product coming in that is taxed by and dutied by the government, producing a good revenue stream. It eliminates any smuggling that might have been going on. And
Okay. So, I mean, do you, Damien, or others on the panel see any possibility at all that there should be created an equivalent for the colored gemstone industry to the Natural Diamond Council, a conglomerate body that would be responsible for marketing gem-set jewellery around the world? Or is the industry just too fragmented and the money's not there, unlike the diamond industry, which has certain bigger players that provide a larger proportion of the whole pie?
May I? I think the message is fragmented across the board for all stones. However, I also think that the message will have difficulty not being fragmented for colored stones, because something we haven't mentioned is that every single human being on Earth perceives color differently. So the way I look at an emerald is not the way she looks at an emerald. Men and women genetically perceive color differently. Women are not colorblind. So the way that you can't do generic marketing for colored stones because nobody sees it the same way. So sure, you could make a Natural Diamond Council for colored stones, but it would be quite interesting because, you know, some laboratories use terminology such as pigeon blood, muso, green, what are the other ones, Danny? Royal blue, cashmere, cornflower blue. It's a big source of conflict, and it's a big source of, there are a lot of issues around that in the colored stone industry, and that's a great example of people see color differently. Each lab has a color scale of what they consider to be certain colors.
So just before I bring the same question to Ed, you know, what is the feasibility or not of a possible equivalent to the Natural Diamond Council for colored gems? I'd just like to say, I'd like to open the floor to questions. So if anybody has a question, after Ed responds, please do raise your hands. We have a microphone ready. Ed.
Yeah, obviously I appreciate this question, and increasingly we're being asked it. We've kind of pioneered the marketing of coloured stones, so obviously forgive me if I'm cautious with this approach, because it would probably us that would need to contribute it more than anybody else. And I guess let's just paint the picture of a challenge, and it sort of builds on Melissa. Let's not cookie cut models that work for diamonds and place them on coloured stones. They are an entirely different product. So, for example, if we just look at one gemstone, emerald, the three largest producing countries for emerald are firstly Zambia and firstly our mine. Secondly, if I'm not wrong, Colombia, and the largest producer there currently, if I can ask your permission, is Muso. And then the third largest producer is Brazil, and that's principally Belmont. Okay? All three of that production is entirely different. Okay, yes, they are emerald, they are green. They are very different products within that green from different places with different price points with different customers. So for me to agree with my friends at Belmont to both spend money promoting emerald when we're basically promoting a generic product when we have different niches would be very difficult indeed. So let's not take what works for diamonds or what's necessary for diamonds and transplant them onto coloured stones. Another example of that is we get often asked, should there be a Kimberley process certificate scheme for coloured stones? Obviously, we welcome anything that builds consumer trust in coloured stones, but what works for diamonds won't necessarily work for coloured stones. They are very different.
Why not with regard to the Kimberley process?
We spoke about this before, David, and I think it's a question that we do get asked often, okay? We're not averse to a Kimberley process certification scheme for coloured stones, and I think we would all work if there was a specific problem that needed to be addressed. The Kimberley process was addressing a horrendous situation in the diamond supply chain in the late 90s, and the solution was the Kimberley process. Nobody in the industry would have wanted it without those situations occurring. There's no such situations occurring in the coloured stone business, so why put a mechanism in place that slows down trade between company and allows countries to improve their wealth through tax and employment, which would obviously be impacted if you had more mechanisms that slowed down trade. Why place that on an industry that doesn't have the problems that diamonds had sought to solve with the Kimberley process?
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor to questions. Once we've taken, all being well, 1 or 2 questions, then I would like to ask each of the panelists in turn to give their point of view on whether or not, in their opinion, is the coloured gemstone industry meeting its market potential. So we're going to go right down the line. So Rui Galopin, please identify yourself, tell us all who you are, and then ask your question.
Thank you very much.
And stand up, please, Rui.
I was not, actually, there you go. Thank you. So, let me go down again. So I'm Rui Galopin Carvalho, I'm a member of ICA, member of GEMA. I have been with CIBJO since 1996, and education was mentioned. And I think CIBJO has done a tremendous work lately towards education. Firstly, and Melissa, she's on the Colored Gemstone Commission, on the Gemstone Commission of CIBJO, and she's witness to this. We have, CIBJO made the gemstone books available for free, something that was not true many years ago. So every stakeholder has access to the gemstone books. Secondly, a few years ago, we have published the Retailer's Reference Guide. That was a very, very powerful, and it is a very powerful resource that the late Roland Naftul pushed CIBJO to publish it as a PDF for free that everyone can actually access, and each and every colored gemstone has relevant information that might help retailers learn about the product. Lastly, there are working groups within CIBJO for jade, for opals, and maybe in the future for some other gem materials that gather experts in the area to create documents that will help the retailers, the foot soldiers of our industry, to get the better knowledge about the product that is fact-checked, as it was mentioned. And CIBJO has done that work. So although this is not a question, this is a statement that maybe everyone in the room should go to the CIBJO website and explore those documents. And Melissa, she is one of the commissions of CIBJO, and she knows exactly how much work is done within the commissions to pull those documents off. So thank you very much.
What Rui is also saying too is if you have an interest in contributing to working groups within CIBJO, please volunteer to Dr. Gaetano.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. So to sum up, I'd like to go down the line, starting with Melissa. And can each of you please answer the question, in your point of view, is the coloured gemstone industry meeting its market potential?
I think the coloured gemstone market is surpassing its potential, at least in my arena of the industry, which is very specific. I think high-end merchandise will always have a very big audience, but I also believe that education, in real estate it's location, and in jewelry it should be education. And I think it's important to make a jewelry experience, whatever that may be, accessible and comfortable and not daunting, which also means sometimes modifying the language so that people understand what we're talking about. I think clients and customers need to understand, for example, what is important on a gem report, what matters, what the words mean. Lots of gem reports say different things. To further what Ed was saying earlier, just as an example, Fura rubies are a different color than Gemfields rubies. So it's important to understand where your stones come from, but also what that means. Mozambique rubies 20 years ago were a different color than they are now, because trace elements are different. I mean, there are a million different reasons. But I think education is vital for any gemstone to live up to its potential, because customers need to feel confident and comfortable.
Alessia, in your view, is the colored gemstone industry meeting its market potential?
In my view, yes. I agree with her, because I think that education and knowledge are the keys in this moment. My final customer asks us color gemstones, so they want it, and they trust us when they tell them that is a good stones. So sometimes they want to see and read the certification and maybe ask us the difference. But if we say, and then not just me, other my colleagues say that it's a good stone, they trust us. But is correct that also they can have education and knowledge to understand.
Thank you. Gianluca.
Yes, so I think, yeah, we are definitely meeting the potential, but I think that the potential is even bigger and brighter. And again, not to repeat the story many times, but based on those basic principles and very importance of trust and transparency and education, and collective work and supported by CIBJO, who's doing a great job, and supported by industry that is fragmented between large-scale leading companies and artisanal that are so important in the whole supply chain. So if we make all these elements work together and we find the recipe, the potential is even much, much, much bigger, for sure.
Thank you. Ed?
I think my answer to this question is some gemstones from some producers are meeting their potential. Now, what I mean by that, I would obviously not be doing my job if I didn't promote Gemfields rubies and Gemfields rubies. So I would say essentially some gemstones, i.e. those that, with respect, can be traceable, and we can bring a story about the responsible production of those gemstones to market, they are meeting the potential because they're meeting the consumer demand and they're maintaining consumer confidence, and that enables the consumer to buy more product, which means that we can all prosper. The other aspect that I think is important for me to argue as to why I feel we are meeting our potential is the amount of product that we're able to bring and bring the value back to the countries in which we operate in. So in just over 10 years of operation from Mozambique, we've sold $1.2 billion worth of rubies. We've paid over $260 million worth of tax to the Mozambique government. That's about 25%, all right, of revenues which otherwise previously evaporated out of the country with no benefit to the citizens of Mozambique. And secondly, we have 1,500 fully unionized, employed, pensioned employees at our mine. And I think that is showing its potential. We're not resting on our laurels. We need to invest and grow and build the business, employ more people, bring more value back to Mozambique, and bring more value back to Zambia. And that's our intention, and that's the work that we do. So I think it is meeting its potential, but we've got more to do.
So Damien, Cody, President of the International Coloured Gemstone Association, you have the final word.
Look, I agree with what all the other panellists have said. The reality is that right now, coloured gemstones are growing market share. I think market share overall for the jewellery and gem industry is falling for all the reasons we've spoken about and more. We are in a perfect storm at the moment. I think most of us would agree with that. We've never experienced, these times before. There will be certain success stories, that will come out of with certain stones and certain mines. But generally speaking, we are the canary in the coal mine for the health of the social ability of countries around the world. the economic environment that we live in. We're the first to suffer and the last to recover. So, our coloured gemstones, we've grown our market share of a shrinking market for the time being. But the potential is massive, absolutely massive. And there is so much more work for our industry to do. With all the things that we've spoken about here today, these are all areas for improvement. And so it's exciting times ahead.
So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Gaetano Cavalieri, Steve Benson, Ed, for putting forward this theme to VICENZAORO. Thank you for coming today.